You're watching Dave and Keith on Net Talk 757, your one-stop shop for volleyball on Hampton Roads.
Hey guys, Dave and Keith here, Net Talk 757, volleyball on Hampton Roads. So, we've been talking about sending us emails, contacting us. We'll talk about different things, and ultimately, when we started this, we want to just bring attention to volleyball, and Dave's red card segment in episode 2, he talked about the respect of the game, and that's really what we're about. We want to respect the game. We want to bring it to you and kind of highlight the 757. But it isn't just that. It is just volleyball in general. Maybe things that Dave's learned over his 700 seasons. How many seasons has it been?
698.
Whatever. For as long as he's been coaching volleyball, and in the years I've been coaching, I'm obviously still learning. We all are.
We
right?
are.
And we received an email from a local club coach. I think he was a 15s coach, just kind of asking us, how do we utilize our assistants? I can tell you over the years, I've seen all levels. I've seen some assistant coaches that literally just sit cross-legged on the floor the entire practice and do nothing. And then I've seen assistant coaches who just go, and they're in every drill. They're working their butts off. They're doing everything they can. And the question is how how do we see utilizing it? What is the best use?
It's a great question.
Yeah, so I'm gonna let you kind of talk, and we'll just talk about it. That's kind of no real format here.
Yeah,
we're just gonna talk.
I'm gonna ask you a question. I guess is that this year you have a very young assistant. Mm-hmm. She's still a college player, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So with having an assistant who may not have the background, because I'm sure a lot of the head coaches in the 757 area have assistants who are pretty young, a little bit more new to the game.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't coached a whole lot, but they've played a good bit. How do you use that to your benefit when you're deciding what to do with your assistant?
Well, actually, the young lady I have this year, she is young, but I was lucky. I've actually the assistant I had before too. My last team, I got her when she was either a freshman or a sophomore. Mm-hmm. Also, what I do personally is I build a practice, but I build a practice knowing that I have her to demo everything. Mm-hmm. And I actually empower them. The first thing I did whenever I started this year is I sat her down and I was like, all right, listen, you are now going to be instilling your, she's been playing since, 7th grade.
Right.
So your 6-7 years of volleyball knowledge onto these kids.
Right.
And it's just a point of really encouraging them to point out what's wrong.
So you're using your assistant maybe more of a demo, this is how to do it, rather than maybe a critiquing situation.
Both.
Okay.
I really do both. Initially, so the way I do a practice is I start off early in the season. I don't even do teamwork. We just do drills. Right. Nothing but drills to work on the basic skills. So when we do a drill and a girl does it wrong, well, let me go back. When we do a drill, we'll demo it first, and I'll have, Allison demo it, show exactly how we want them to do it, and then we'll let them do it. But she's down there critiquing them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I personally, if you have an assistant coach who's in college or just got out of college, use it. Use that credibility. Every one of those kids on your team want to be her.
Now, do you find that because your assistants are a little bit closer to the age of the kids, do you feel as though those assistants get the same respect as maybe an older adult who's coaching them?
I have to, that's a great question. The first thing I do at the start of the season is I sit the team down and I say, listen, you are treating her as if she's me. I immediately instill the respect that they should have. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, because they're young, they have to prove it. So that's a conversation I had with Noelle and I had with Allison. Is like, okay, listen, you're close to their age. they may have this like, what do you know attitude. So I've tried to instill into them, don't do anything stupid, don't do anything immature that would degrade from their belief in your abilities. And then ultimately, when a drill happens, and if you know, for the both of them, both those players are great defensive players, right?
Right.
When I start hitting or I start really pushing them, and the girls see them play, they get that respect. But real importantly, to answer that question, it's my job to make sure they respect her.
Right.
If I see anyone mouthing off or disrespecting them, I immediately jump in.
Well, and I would think that also with that comes a little bit of, it may be neat on the other side of things, even though they may not have quite the knowledge or quite the background in coaching. You know, I could see it being maybe neat in that the kids recognize that their assistants are still part of the process.
Yeah.
They're still playing.
Yeah.
So, you know, the assistants aren't necessarily asking them to do something that they're not doing on a regular basis.
That's actually a funny thing you say, because I had practice earlier tonight, and actually Allison said she had just come from an open gym practice, and she was like, girls, what are you doing? My coach just had me doing this same exact thing, you know, 45 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're
that can be very
right.
powerful, I think,
Yeah.
especially for younger kids, because, you know, for a lot of the kids in the 757 area, you know, obviously their maybe ending goal is to play college volleyball, and if their direct first assistant is a current college player, that gives them a resource to go to. You know, ask what college is really like. Maybe that player can help them with recruitment type of stuff. So, you know, I can see having a young assistant. You know, there's obviously benefits to all of that, and then there's obviously disadvantages of that.
And you know, another thing I've done, you know, for other coaches who have young assistants, I think every coach should have a practice plan, and I actually have a notebook that I've written, and I've got it for 6 years, and I go back into it and I'll pull plans out. But I have a notebook for this year's team that I go in and I write down what I'm going to do every practice, and she sees me doing that, right? So she learns right off the bat that you just can't come in willy-nilly and be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And even on the practices where I do come like that, I go to that notebook, and I'm honest. I'll look at her and say, you know what, I was really busy at work today. I didn't have time to put a plan together, but I'll talk to her. We want to work on hitting. We want to work on transition defense and this. And then I'm like, let's look at my book. And we'll flip through and we'll find the drills that I've done in the past, and then we'll put those in. That's the one thing. The other thing is I will actually say, okay, guess what? You're running the next practice. These are the things we need to cover. Put together a plan.
Right.
And that I did that to Noelle a bunch of times. I've done it to Allison once or twice.
Give them a little bit more empowering.
Yeah, and then they take ownership. And you know what? The thing is they're running a drill and they get lost. I'm standing right there, and I can help them.
Right.
So that's huge. I made a comment earlier. Don't just let them sit there and do nothing.
Right.
I mean, that drives me insane.
Yeah, I would hope that, you know, and maybe, you know, I think there is some, you know, some merit to saying that, you know, sometimes head coaches just don't know what to do with their assistants, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure that there's a lot of coaches out there who struggle with that, and you know, you're concerned with the team, you're concerned about what the team's doing, and you're concerned about creating drills for that, and sometimes the assistants maybe on the back burner of your thoughts when you're coming up with those plans and what you're going to do, and you know, maybe just taking time to sit down and think, well, how can I get this assistant involved? Because once you do that, boy, does it become so much easier as a head coach.
What you made me think of, I've sat through and seen a bunch of your practices, and you know, you'll come to a practice, you'll be working on one thing, your assistant's working on something else. I mean, what do you do to keep them in?
You know, one of the things that, you know, and it takes time. You know, I don't think I've ever had a first assistant who the first day I got them in the gym, everything was running smoothly.
Right.
Most of the time, it takes a year. And for some of our coaches out there, that may be the luxury you don't have if you're constantly, you know, getting young kids and they're coming in the door, and you know, 8 months later they're out of the door. No sooner did you train them in what you want them to do, and you lose them, and you're starting all over again. Luckily, I've been able to keep assistants for a long period of time. Matter of fact, in all the seasons I've been coaching juniors, I've only had 4 assistants.
Right.
And so, that makes a big difference. But, each assistant I sort of handled a different way. And the way I approached it was, I want my life to be easier. So I need to find out what my assistant is good at, what my assistant is passionate in. And then I feel it's my job then to allow them to do that to benefit the team, make them feel as comfortable as possible as soon as possible, and then I take in the other reins.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a head coach that's difficult because they may be comfortable doing something that you really enjoy doing. Yeah. My assistant right now played middle in college, and the previous assistant that I had, I worked with all the middles. So I went from working with middles exclusively to giving that up and working on something else because that was what my assistant brought to the table. So by no means was I going to then say, even though you have all this experience with middles, you're going to go and coach setters because I want to coach middles. Yeah. I think it's part of the head coach's job to assess that and make them feel comfortable. Because when they're comfortable and the kids realize that what they're talking about is solid and sound information, they're going to gain that respect from the players. And then each coach that I've had, I've really tried to see, is this a coach who's good with numbers? Is this a coach who's good at keeping stats? Is this a coach who's maybe more verbal? And so some coaches I've had, in the past, I had to keep more stats. My assistant coach that I have right now, Lindsay, she's great at keeping stats. She can keep stats and still be involved in the game in the areas that she needs to be involved in. And it's gotten to the point now where it's sort of funny because we get passionate about what's going on, and in the heat of the moment you're screaming out something and we're realizing that we're screaming the same exact saying or the same exact words to the same player, and we even make a game of it. We'll shout it and then we'll look at each other and we'll be like, I think I won that. I think I got it out before you did. Right. So that's nice because when you're on the same page communicating, it's almost to where they have 2 head coaches, not a head and assistant coach. And I've felt good about the things that we've done in the past because a lot of my head coaches have become, or a lot of my assistant coaches have become head coaches and very successful head coaches. And I think it's one of the reasons is I've picked good assistant coaches who've had a good background, but then I've also given them the power to learn the game and make mistakes just like I allow my players to make mistakes. And no one's perfect. The head coach isn't perfect, the assistant coaches aren't perfect, but they know that I'm still in charge. But they also know that they are a very, very important part of what's going on and that I need them to be at the top of their game 100% of the time as well. And that's where that sort of respecting the game comes in. If I don't respect my assistant coach and I don't allow them the opportunity to do things with the team without me overseeing them, without me with them feeling like I'm going to critique everything they're doing, then I'm not honoring what they're doing, and vice versa. So I think there's a trust thing that's in there too.
I think what you said right at the start of that was the key to all of it is knowing that you have to understand them.
Yes.
So often, and this goes with even coaching girls, so often, someone has their cookie stamp, this is how I'm going to do it, and everyone needs to fit into it. And, that ends up being a battle. And you know what? Sometimes it works.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes you'll have an assistant who, that's okay, and they'll adjust. And a lot of good assistants will be able to make that adjustment, but a lot won't. And, when they're not only are you battling your assistant, but then your team and your structure and your the feeling that's in the gym isn't quite there. And I'm a big believer in there has to be a certain atmosphere in the gym. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be going all out 100 miles per hour every practice. There's some practices due to injury or due to a big tournament coming up where you need to save some legs and whatever, but that same energy and focus and goal-oriented practices, have to be there. And if the head coach and the assistant coach aren't on the same page, I think it's much more difficult for that to occur.
Yeah, I think ultimately you need to communicate, right? Whatever your choice is, whatever decision, whatever path if you're a cookie cutter guy, if you're a guy who wants to, or a girl who wants to kind of feel your assistant out, if you're not talking to them, if you don't have an open dialogue, and you have to have an open dialogue where they can question what you're doing.
Yeah, well, assistants cannot be afraid to say, hey, I need to talk, and they cannot be afraid to give their opinion.
Yeah.
And head coaches can't be people who don't listen.
Yeah.
I think being a head coach, you need to listen as much as you need to talk.
Yeah.
And especially with your assistant coaches, and and it still may not work. You may realize after a season we just don't match up.
Yeah.
But if, like you said, and that's a great point. If there's no communication there, how are you going to know whether you match up or not?
Right.
We constantly get on our players, right, about communicating, about being a team, but then you don't see head coaches and assistant coaches communicating.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's going on with each other.
Yeah.
So, I think that's definitely a thing that, can be worked on by everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But great question.
Yeah.
I think it was Joe, maybe.
I
I think it was Joe. So, Joe, out there, great question for Net Talk 757. All you other listeners, keep them coming. We love the questions. If there's anything that you want to ask us or anything dealing with the show, send it to us on our YouTube. They can do it YouTube. They can check out our YouTube. They can check out our email. Our email is what?
nettalk757@yahoo.com.
So send us something.
It's probably like right here.
Perfect.
Wait, I'm going with the wrong hand. Right here.
There you go.
There. It's right there.
So send us something. You can send us something direct on our Facebook page.
Yep.
So any way you can get a hold of us, and we'll try to address your questions. So keep them coming.
All right, and talk to you soon.
See how I'm always I always feel like I'm always.
The reason is because you feel like you have to lean to me.
No, but look, I feel like I'm sitting up straight, but then in the camera it looks like I'm leaning.
You are leaning.
But why is that?
Because you're trying to lean into me.
No, I'm not. See, I'm still leaning.
Okay. Let's try
See,
this
even
again.
if here, this looks okay. I guess this looks.
Just talk. You ready?
I'm ready.
You're an idiot.
All right, Net Talk 757 people, we're back with the red card segment. Am I still leaning?
No.
We've discussed that I might be leaning all the time. I don't know.
Just talk.
Okay. All right, we'll start over again. Isn't it though?
I'm leaving that in because